Hello and welcome to yet another episode of History Time. Last week we went to Nagercoil. We've neglected Chennai for some time, so let's get back to an episode on the city. You know, it's always been the practice to keep changing the names of streets in this city. The British referred to it by one name, subsequent administrations give it another name, and then we as the people in the city refer to it by both names to add to the confusion. This keeps going on all the time. One such thoroughfare is Broadway, which is also known as Prakasam Salai. In today's episode, let's take a look at the history behind these two names. If you go to Broadway today, it is not broad, it is one of the most congested thoroughfares, and there is no way. Invariably, you will find that it's full of traffic being held up at all times. It's full of spectacle shops and cycle shops. But if I told you that in the 18th century and in the 19th century, it was one of the most fashionable districts of Madras, would you believe me? Let me tell you what the story is behind that. The British came to Madras, as we all know, and set up Fort St. George in 1639, and that was referred to as White Town. And behind it, to provide services to that fort, came up what was known as Black Town, because we, the dark-skinned people, were living there. Black Town had two halves, Muthialpet and Peddanaickenpet, and in between these two was a vast open ditch that was known as the Edappalayam, which the British referred to as Attapalam. And this open ditch was really the drain of Black Town, a stinking drain through which all the refuse of Peddanaickenpet and Muthialpet would collect, and by gravity would slowly and in a stately fashion make its way to the sea, spreading the smell all around. And you know how we are as people. If we see any open area, we'll dump garbage in it. So even then we were just the same, we were not any different. And so that remained one of the most polluted sewers of this particular city. It was of no use to anyone, but it fulfilled a very important purpose, namely that of drainage. Now cut to the 1760s, when a lawyer called Stephen Popham relocates from Calcutta to Madras. Having come here, he purchases a house in Black Town and begins to live there. Popham was more a commercial adventurer than he was a lawyer. And whatever he did with an eye to profit. One day, he bought up all of Attapalam on a speculation. The people laughed at his folly. What was he going to do with that ditch? But Popham was smarter than everybody else. During those days, the area that we now refer to as Central Station, the Madras Medical College, the Parktown Post Office, all of this was at an elevation, and it was known in English as Hogs Hill and in Tamil as Narimedu. Popham represented to the government that it was a security risk, and that if invaders came, and they could be anybody, the French could come, Tipu Sultan could come, Shivaji could come, Hyder Ali could come, anybody could come, they would position their cannons on this elevation and target Fort St. George. The government lost its nerve and decided to flatten Narimedu or Hogs Hill. What do you do with all the sand and soil that comes out of a plateau? Popham said, I've got a ditch ready-made for you, just come and fill it up there. And so, on one side, Hogs Hill was flattened, on the other side, Attapalam came up and became flat land. And because it was made of sand brought from elsewhere that was rammed into the ground, the place became known as Mannadi, which is how we refer to it even today as Mannadi. And right in the middle of Peddanaickenpet and Muthialpet, you had a broad thoroughfare which came to be known as Popham's Broadway. Popham then sold the land to the Britishers, and they began to settle there, coming out of Fort St. George. They built their houses there, they built churches over there, they built schools over there, and the first departmental store of Madras, Oaks and Company, also came up over there. Cinema theatres would come up later. Drama theatres would come up, several things. But Popham himself did not live long enough to enjoy the wealth that he generated out of selling Broadway. He died in a carriage accident in Kanchipuram and was eventually buried in St. Mary's Cemetery on the island, which is just next to the viaduct that leads you to Central Station from the bodyguard Munishwarar temple. He is still there. I have gone and seen his grave. Popham died and the area continued to be known as Popham's Broadway. By the early 20th century, it had changed in character completely. The English had long left. They had gone away to places like Nungambakam, Kilpok, Veperi and other places. And now a lot of Indians had taken over. This became the home to printing presses, to various shops of various kinds. Several newspapers and magazines came out from that area. The Hindu came from there, Indian Express came from there, Ananda Vigadan came from there. Several papers came out from there. And it became a very commercial area. In 1928, the British government sent the Simon Commission to look into the claims of Indians, the demands of Indians wanting independence. Ironically, this commission, headed by Sir John Simon, did not have even one Indian in it. Mahatma Gandhi declared that the commission should be boycotted. And wherever the members of the commission went, they were met with protest march. Madras was no different. In 1928, when the commission came here, the entire China Bazaar Road, that what we know today as NSE Bose Road, and Broadway was in commotion. People had gathered in numbers to protest. At that time, there was a student by name R.R. Dalavai who was studying in the Pachepas College. Overcome with emotion, you know how students can be, he took some phosphorus and flung it into the car of the Chief Justice of the High Court of Madras. The car caught fire. The Chief Justice summoned the army and the police, and soon there was an armed police force standing all around Broadway and NSE Bose Road. Dalavai was petrified at what he had done. He ran to the offices of a well-known lawyer called Prakasam, who was also a freedom fighter. Prakasam was also bringing out a magazine called Swarajya from Broadway. He went to him and, huffing and puffing, informed him about what he had done and what the consequences were going to be. Prakasam rushed to the spot where the police had issued shoot-at-sight orders and the crowd was not moving away. He opened his shirt and stood in front of the police and said, "Before you shoot them, you shoot me." That brought sense to everybody. The police calmed down immediately. The police commissioner came and met Prakasam and appealed to him, saying that please ask the people to move away quietly. There is no reason, we are not going to shoot at anybody. Prakasam then appealed for peace and the crowd melted away gradually. This act of valor of Prakasam was never forgotten. Later, in 1946, he would become the Prime Minister of Madras Presidency for a brief while. And in 1953, when Andhra was created as a separate state, he would become the first Chief Minister of Andhra as well. He was always known as Andhra Kesari, the lion from Andhra. Much later, because of that great act of valor of Prakasam, Broadway was named Prakasam Salai. And today, if you come out of Broadway, cross the Law College and go towards the Esplanade, you will find a statue for Prakasam over there. It reminds us about the valor of great freedom fighters by which today we can call ourselves an independent nation, and we can thank them for the comfort in which we live today. Sacrifices of people like Prakasam can never be forgotten. That then is the history of Broadway and Prakasam Salai. In the coming episode, I'll take up a very interesting story, the waterside market, Tannir Thurai market. Let us see what was the history behind that place and what led to the creation of the market and what it is now. See you for the time being. Bye.